Okay, the next item on our agenda, petition 2019-07, request for an informal advisory opinion from a county officer employed to determine whether there is a conflict of interest under section 2-84 of the Hawaii County Code for his office to prosecute cases involving a protest site on Hawaii Island. And that would be prosecuting attorney Mitch Roth.
Aloha and good morning, and thank you for having me. And I apologize for putting this on you now. But let me just kind of give you...
Well, wait, first of all, would you like an open or a closed hearing?
Open's fine.
Okay.
I don't think I have anything to hide here. You know, this all started with a phone call, actually an email from an attorney in Honolulu asking if my son's employment caused a conflict. And my son works for NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and I said, first of all, he's living in California. I don't think there's any conflict whatsoever. But I asked, why would you think there's a conflict? And he said, well, he doesn't work for NASA, he works for Caltech. I said, well, I just saw his badge, it says NASA. I don't think so. I called him up, and he said, well, yeah, it's kind of complicated. It's kind of under both. I said, okay, so he works for Caltech. What does that mean? Well, Caltech is one of the partners in TMT. I said, okay, well, so far removed, I don't think there's a problem. The papers get involved. The paper called me up, and I said, well, look, I'm pretty sure there's no conflict of interest here. But I want to just disclose, my wife also works for a telescope, and I still don't see a conflict of interest because her job is so far removed from what's going on as far as TMT that there's no conflict. Well, the AP writes an article, and the article, they asked for opinions of different legal professionals, and they had my opinion. The Attorney General did not give an official opinion, although I did talk to her and she didn't see there was a conflict. But the way the article was written gave the appearance that there may be a conflict, including, well, they had this one professor from Washington who I've never met before, this other attorney who started this whole thing, and then the law school professor, Ken Lawson. And I don't know if you received his email.
Yeah, we have it.
Which is kind of interesting because Ken Lawson makes clear that there's no legal conflict of interest. But, you know, for the appearance of impropriety, maybe it's best that I step aside. So I've done my research on this. I can find no criminal, no violation of our rules of professional responsibility. I've asked for not only you for an opinion, but I've asked the Office of Disciplinary Counsel, the body that sees after attorneys. They gave me a written opinion, non-opinion, basically saying that they can't give me an opinion whether there is or is not one. And they said maybe I should ask our local ethics committee or people in charge, which is actually you. The Attorney General said that. ODC said that. In the ODC opinion, though, and I want to just be completely fair, they refer to a Missouri Law Review article that was written in 1998, which is titled, "What You See is What You Get, Applying the Appearance of Impropriety Standard to Prosecutors." And I take my job very seriously. I read through this, and there's something that they talk about in here, and I know Judge Wiseman will probably knows a lot about the appearance of impropriety, and judges, they talk about what's called procedural justice. And procedural justice is not only being fair, it's having the appearance of being fair and having people feel that they can be heard. I sent this opinion to the Attorney Generals, asked them to chime in, didn't get a response back. The cases were coming. So in an abundance of caution, the first set of cases, I said, look, we will recuse ourselves from these cases. So the cases are going to be prosecuted, and I think everybody should understand that somebody is going to be prosecuting these cases. There's never a doubt that the cases would be prosecuted or not prosecuted. They're going to be prosecuted. The question is there, one, a conflict of interest? I don't see one on the county ethics. I don't see any in the state ethics. Or is there the appearance of impropriety that would make it so that I could not supervise or my office could not handle these cases? A couple of days ago, I did get an opinion from Joe Camellamella, our corp counsel, and he had some really great information, again, finding no conflict of interest, and I do have a copy. I know that he sent that to me as a privileged attorney-client communication. I have no problem sharing that with the Ethics Board, and I think the Ethics Board, before you make a decision, should probably review his material. And if you haven't looked at the material that was recommended by the Office of Disciplinary Counsel, it may be worthwhile to read the first part of that talks about procedural justice and the like. My eventual ask is that I believe you'll find that there is no appearance of impropriety, and if there is, it is so far removed that there should be no problem. There is no conflict of interest. Neither my wife nor my son have any financial, I mean, they get paid by these agencies, but they have no say in what happens on the mountain. Their positions are so far removed that very, very limited. The question on the appearance of impropriety, I think, has been blown out of proportion because of the way it has been handled in the media. But I think in all fairness, so we're all transparent and we're all, doing what's right, we take a look at this and make a decision. I have to give a couple of things that I just realized I may have some other things that also come into to play. I sit on a board for a group called NextTech. NextTech is a group that's looking after kids with in the STEM area, science, technology, engineering, and math. And so we do a couple of things. I realize this because tomorrow night I'll probably be night watch at a camp that we're doing for these kids. They're high school kids, and we're trying to introduce them and get them into a position of being able to have jobs in these industries. Before I finish, I want to just say one other thing. I think there's a lot of reasons that people are protesting on the mountain. I personally don't think that science, technology, engineering, mathematics, astronomy is something that most of these people are really against. I don't think that these people who are protesting are against making sure that we have jobs on our islands for these kids once they graduate in STEM areas. I don't think that these people on the mountain have any problems with what's going on with astronomy, with what's going on Mars. My son works on the Mars Curiosity rover. But because of the way the story has been played out, and because of the way that government officials are being looked at across the nation, not just in our country, I felt it was my responsibility to take the highest road possible, come here and ask for a decision from this board. And I know that you're generally giving an informal, but I would like to have a written decision, because believe it or not, what you come up with here will probably be discussed in law schools around the country when you deal with ethics. So thank you very much, and I'm willing to answer any questions that you have.
First of all, there's, in checking sources, the ABA used to have a judicial, an ethics hotline,
Right.
for judges and for attorneys and so on.
So ours is the Office of Disciplinary Counsel.
That's a bar association.
That's the bar. Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
ABA.
I'm talking ABA. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you, is it your position by stepping aside, the whole office has to step aside?
And that's one of the things that we can do. The criticism on that has been, well, look, these people still work for you, they're still paid by you, and so there's that issue. I personally believe that there is no conflict of interest. I believe that as far as the appearance of impropriety, there is a case that is now on point that Mr. Kamelamela has cited, and that has to do with TMT and Judge Amano, who was the arbiter of the case, where she had a membership at Imi Loa. And the group tried to make it seem that she could not be fair because of her membership at Imi Loa. And I think you'll agree with me that a judge, much more than a prosecutor in a case, the issue of appearance of impropriety is a lot bigger. And so that, I think, sets a little bit more. The other thing that should be understood, in my research, in our office's research, not a single case that we're dealing with has TMT either as a victim or as an offender. We're dealing with obstructing government operations.
Mm-hmm.
So we could not find a single case in the country that was like this, where you say, look, this is a secondary thing that is related. We did that because it's like this decision. Whatever decision you make, it's going to be criticized. But for the time being, we said, look, let's take the high road. We'll take the whole office out. We believe there's going to be more cases. And it's not that I'm taking a position on what we should do. The charter says you shall prosecute the cases of the state of Hawaii. My oath of office, which I take very seriously. The other thing that happens on this is, what happens if one of these people up there is a victim of a crime? Does that mean I have a conflict that I can't, prosecute that case? If one of the sheriffs, for example, assaults one of these people, would I have to conflict that case? My ask at the end of the day is that you come back, and I hope you agree with me that there is no conflict, that office doesn't need to be conflicted out. But for procedural justice purposes, for the purposes of giving people faith in the judicial process, until this decision has been made, we felt the cleanest way possible forward is to conflict the office out. It's possible you say, well, look, because of your wife and your son's position, and because of the volunteer work that you do for this STEM group, you should conflict out and have your first deputy take charge of these cases, which we're prepared to do that as well.
Yeah, and as you know, that's been quite successful among many law offices and firms around the country.
And we're prepared, and we're actually making arrangements for that. But we want to make sure that we're as transparent as possible, and acting as ethically as possible.
When it comes to the term appearance of impropriety, which, as you noted, has been in my world for the last 2-3 decades,
right,
on the bench, it's always necessary to, in looking at that, and it's always that concept, it's always necessary to go to what we all had the experience in law school of learning about, what was called the reasonable man standard. I'm just wondering, after all these years, did they change the man in view of gender? Is it now a reasonable person? But it was always the reasonable man.
It's still the reasonable person, it's a reasonable person standard, but
Okay, but what would that reasonable person think about this? So, and that's taking it right down to street level. If you went out in the street and just asked anyone at random and gave them a nutshell of this, look, my son works for this, it's all these levels removed. We're prosecuting people that would be prosecuted anywhere for the same thing, regardless of, notwithstanding any TMT or anything. If they came down here and blocked the intersection right here, I mean, you know,
I'm completely there with you,
the
Judge.
rule of law says they must be moved.
Right.
And I dealt with many road blockings and.
Yeah.
uh,
You know, you make some great points. Even when they were writing the article, I told them there's no conflict.
Yeah.
But the problem was, the way the article was written, they only had legal experts saying, conflict, you should recuse. And, you know, unfortunately, we live in an age where press gets involved and creates reality.
Oh, yeah, they set the,
Um,
certain people are expert in setting the news agenda of the day.
That's,
Yeah. In any event, and most people will never read the story, just the headline.
right.
That's what we have to live with these days. But I noticed that the AG office gave you cases. Did the AG's office give you any cases to refer you to cases at all?
AG's did not. Joe Camella did, and like I said, I have his. I think he did a really good job of you know, doing his legal research there.
Yeah.
And I think his assessment is his conclusion is a conclusion that you should come out to, that there is no conflict. There is
Right.
the appearance of impropriety is so far removed, it's so distant that that's the way you should find.
Thank you.
But I do believe, in fairness, you should have a chance to read those. And if you haven't seen this law review article, the whole thing's kind of long. The first, I think, first 5 pages, and it's
Well, remember, lawyers used to get paid by the word in England.
the good thing is most of this, the way it's written, it's mostly notes at the bottom, but so it's a very short couple of pages.
Most decisions coming from the Supreme Court and other courts are 70 to 150
Yes.
pages. A most significant case, Brown versus Board of Education, on the segregation issue back in 1954. It was 14 pages. Yeah, so. In any event, thank you, Mr. Roth.
Thank you very
That's all I
much.
have.
Well, I want to thank you for the chance to meet you face to face. I applaud your coming here because I think this is a particularly good time to have a discussion about this. And I understand, I mean, the tensions in this community are so great. I mean, I feel somewhat intimidated by the flags and so on because I'm not, I just don't look Hawaiian. So my sympathies it's very confusing. It's very confusing for a lot of people. I do think that the fate of workers at the telescopes is not just a matter, perhaps, of media attention. I mean, I happen to know somebody who's been out of work now for, 2 or 3 months, not getting any salary because the road is blocked. And this person is very much in sympathy with the cause, but nevertheless, he's not had any income. And he's hurting. So it's some of this could be a matter of it's not anything against you personally. I mean, I think you have the community's support and trust, absolutely. I mean, that's my feeling. But the fact that two of your relatives are dependent for their salaries or their income on TMT, however remote it may seem to me, it could, make people think, And if you recuse yourself, as you probably already have, do you have someone else who would proceed with the
Oh, yeah, so,
prosecution? That people might want to know.
so absolutely, there's never been a question of whether the cases are going to be prosecuted. Right now, after recusing myself, the attorney generals, they have attorneys that are now handling it. So their attorneys fly over. Luckily, the cases have been on 1 day a month, and they're all together. So there's attorneys who are assigned. They're just not assigned from my office. And let me just correct you, because my son's salary has, really nothing to do with TMT. He's lives in Pasadena. He works at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. His position is on the Mars rover. So if something dealt with the Mars rover, which Mauna Kea has nothing to do with, then that's possible. My wife works for Subaru at the office down below. They do have astronomers going up to the mountain. They have people going up, and they do remote viewing from down below. So I would even say that her salary is not dependent. I mentioned this, I think, in my letter. My wife's job, like many of the astronomy, she works for RCUH, which is the Research Corporation of the University of Hawaii. So kind of technically, I guess she's a University of Hawaii employee, although it's the Research Corporation. And the University of Hawaii does have management of the mountain. However, again, that's so far removed from her that I don't believe that there's anything. However, again, going back to the way the story was written and the way people jump on things, it's easy for people to be confused.
Is there any way to clarify that in some way that you could, that's so personal. People are not entitled to know that.
Well, I guess I'll say it this way. There's none so blind as those who won't see, and none so deaf as those who won't hear. So you can tell people, but people will try to make something out of anything. And to me, I really believe that there's nothing there, but because there's been a lot of debate on it, I get emails and Facebooks and people sending me, hey, how dare you, how can you not see this conflict? People will see what they want to see. And, I've tried to make it as plain as possible. Like I said, when the paper called and they asked for the story, I volunteered the information that my wife worked rather than trying to keep it out of the press. Because I think the more you do things like this, the more you come for boards like this and tell the story, put yourself in harm's way, the more people feel that they can trust what happens in government, and they find out what the story is. And I'll say that, and people are going to criticize that too. So, but that's just the way things are. You have to have tough skin when you're in a position like mine.
Well, I just don't want you to take it personally.
I
Anyway,
don't.
thank you for sharing your information with us.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have one other question. The people that are charged with the crimes at issue here, the crime is obstructing roadway or something like that?
Basically obstructing government operation.
Right. So, and my question is, Are you aware of any other crimes your office has prosecuted? Similar crimes?
To these?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. This is our second bout of this. We had a whole bunch of cases in 2015 that we prosecuted, and then there was a Supreme Court decision that changed the way the judge looked at those cases, and we had to dismiss a bunch of those cases based on rulings that we were getting from the bench. So we've prosecuted and we've also dismissed cases because of, what people don't understand, and I know you'll understand this, Judge, is that as a prosecutor, we're a minister of justice. Our role is very limited. There's cases that we want to charge, we want to go forward with, but we have an ethical burden. If we don't believe we can prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt, we don't charge. And, that's hard sometimes. Sometimes there's things like the police will violate the search and seizure laws, and so we'll lose our evidence, or we lose witnesses.
Yeah, happens all the time.
It happens all the time, and, the public doesn't see that. I think you as a judge probably saw that more often, that I think as prosecutors, we try to be as fair as possible, because we win. We're also writing an appeal, and an appeal, we want to make sure it sticks.
Yeah. And as you know, judges are restrained from speaking out.
Right.
In many cases, I had to dismiss because the prosecution came up with a bogus search and seizure that the cops did, but yet this never gets out to the public.
Right.
I just had to sign off on a dismissal.
Nobody wants to convict an innocent person. And I think in these cases, and we're talking about the prospective cases, not the cases that we've already conflicted out on. But these cases, we're not talking about cases where we're going, I want you to go out there and arrest this person. Basically, you have people that are out there that are making, it's like a traffic citation. The officers make the citation, they send them to us, we look at the facts of the case. There's cases that, the officers miss things and we just don't charge. So, and there's cases and we're looking at here that, if they don't have all of the facts, if they don't have all of the elements, we'll dismiss. And we've already done that recently on one of these cases. So we're trying to be as fair as possible, but we're also, being as fair as possible is the easy part. Appearing fair as possible, the appearance of being fair is a whole lot more difficult.
Thanks for coming. I remember the last time you were here was that guy.
I do too.
And what's transpired since proved you were absolutely correct to question all of that. That was.
I just want to share this real quickly. After they did their investigation, they said they were going to do and it's pertinent to this. They said they were going to do an investigation. They did an investigation. They had a finding. The media stories came out, and then they changed their finding. I've never seen that happen before.
After the fact?
After the fact, they changed their finding. They said, oh, well, this was just an administrative finding. They change decisions all the time. It's like, for me, that drives me crazy. The whole thing that we got involved with before is that government wasn't playing by the rules. And, shame on us if we can't hold the highest ethical standings possible. We work for the people, we serve the people, and we need to do that with integrity.
Well, first thing, you, in your written request, it asked for a formal opinion.
Right.
But we
And-
issue informal opinions.
One, I feel very strong where you're going to come out on this, because I've done my research. I've gone through the law. I don't see any way you could come out differently. But even if you did, I feel that we have to follow that. But I did that because the public should know what was discussed, and the public should know what your decision was. I could have said informal, and I would have known, and I could have told people, and so what? The people who are protesting need to know, and they need to know that whatever happens, they're going to be treated fairly, at least by my office.
The informal opinion of this board is a written opinion.
Okay.
A formal opinion is issued if somebody doesn't follow the informal opinion.
Okay.
Yeah, so you'll get something in writing. Yes.
Okay, then informal's fine.
She will draft it for us.
Thanks.
You said that, a little bit earlier, that Joe Kamelamela had given you a written response in which he had done research and found.
Yeah, is it okay if I approach?
Yeah, that there would be no conflict. Is that something you'd like to share with us?
Sure.
Okay,
Yeah, I think we brought this up before.
great.
You're very welcome.
So in this, and we'll read this, Mr. Kamelamela said there would be, he didn't feel that there would be any conflict, and where he said, in his short answer right on the first page, there does not seem to be an actual conflict of interest which would require your recusal. In addition, the circumstances probably do not fairly give rise to an appearance of impropriety and reasonably cast suspicion on your impartiality so as to require recusal. Okay. And you fulfilled the disclosure, and there's been discussion on the recusal. You know, the trusting government issue, do you think that your prosecution of these cases, if it went forward, would have trusting government issues for, I mean, some people will feel that way, some people will feel the other way. It's not black and white. You know what I mean?
It really isn't black and white. I think if you would have asked me this question before the article was written, I'd hands down say no problem.
Right.
Because people read only what they want to read in the papers, and the way the article was written, there's a perception that all the legal experts believe that it's a conflict. And that's what kind of got me here, is that perception that was created by the story.
Okay.
And, you know, again, it's kind of interesting that one of those legal experts is saying, well, there's not really any law that's you know, being violated. There's no conflict. It's just, you know, to just avoid that appearance. The other interesting thing that was in there, because people have been, they take what they want to take. If you take a look at the state ethics conflict of interest, and I think I put that in the thing, that's a little closer question, because I think they just have to work someplace. But again, because we're not prosecuting anybody who's working for TMT, TMT is not a victim, I don't think there's any real conflict of interest.
Okay. You talked about 2-84, which is the conflict of interest. It says in here, financial interest, and yet you've disclosed that your son
Works for Caltech.
works for Caltech, which
or
is
NASA Caltech, okay?
right, but he's not directly impacted.
I think if you look at
Financially.
284, Mr. Kamelamela does a great job in which you have, he bolds that substantial financial interest.
Yeah, I didn't put the substantial, I just said, yeah, but substantial.
So it would, when they first called me and asked me about this, I said, well, would that mean that if someone is stole from KTA or Safeway, that, you know, I'd have a conflict? Because my family shops at KTA and Safeway. And, you know, when you steal, you raise the prices. Or if we're giving a ticket to somebody who's driving a car for, you know, speeding, on the roads that my family, we give speeding tickets because we want to keep people safe on the roads, and people who are speeding are technically putting my family in jeopardy. So, I mean, we all have some kind of financial interest with what happens on the mountain. As remote as it may seem, it may be the cost of goods that come in, the lack of jobs, the amount of jobs. I think their employment is so far removed that there is no real financial interest in TMT.
Right. And I noticed in the course of your presentation, you referenced that numerous times. If this board found that there was no conflict and you went ahead and prosecuted these cases, do you think that would give cause for people to appeal their cases? In other words, even though the Board of Ethics found there would be no conflict, we think there is, we want to appeal. So we go to a judicial body to ask, they review all of the stuff that we've reviewed here.
People ask me all the time, can I get sued for something like that? And whatever you do, you live in America, you can get sued for anything. You could get sued technically for giving the opinion that you're giving. That doesn't mean they're going to win. Could they appeal this? Absolutely could they appeal it. They could appeal it. Do I think they could win on an appeal? Absolutely not. I don't think that there is any grounds for them to win on that. And I think looking at the most recent case, again with Judge Amano, making her decisions and having her membership in Imi Loa, I think the precedent is that we would win on that, on just that case alone.
I was thinking more of an appeal for, say, you prosecute someone, and then they get a sentence, and then they appeal that on the basis of you actually were conflicted, and this board gave a wrong opinion.
So again,
Yeah.
they could appeal. The standard that they'd have is so great that I do not think they would win. But absolutely, I mean, we live in America. Like I said, every criminal case I do, our office does, there's room for appeal, and you can, the judge.
It's doubtful an appeal like that would even proceed. They would have to challenge your authority.
Right.
Have any legal basis of an appeal that they were wrongly prosecuted by the wrong person. The ethics, I don't think, could enter into an appeal.
Every case we have, there's appeals, and they could probably sneak that in as another issue. But I don't think they would succeed on that.
Those are the questions I had.
Thank you very much.
Oh, no, we appreciate all you do. So, is there a motion from the board?
Yeah, I move we take this under advisement. I'd like to look at these submissions.
Okay.
All right, I'll second that.
Okay, so moved and seconded that we take Ms. Ross' request for an informal written opinion.
We need some time to read some of this
Right.
again, yes.
Under advisement.